Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's processing education session. We're going to have two parts to this session. The first part is going to be focusing on the processing environment for shell eggs, and the second portion of our afternoon program is to focus on the export of eggs and turkeys and other poultry meats out of the U.S. And we have a wonderful slate of speakers today. We are first going to start off with, before I start that, welcome. We're all missing the fact that we're not interacting with you one-on-one, so this is give us a few little moments if we have some speed bumps. But I will draw your attention to the question and answer little active block that you have in the bottom of your screen. Please utilize that to ask questions throughout the entire session. You do not have to wait. You can go ahead and ask questions as speakers are engaging and presenting their materials. We will answer verbally as many questions as possible, but we will ensure that the speakers or someone, myself or Manpreet Singh, who is also helping moderate the session, we will reply to you directly through that same function, and you'll get a notification when we respond to your question. So please keep up that and use that function. We're looking forward to interacting with you. Our first speaker is coming from the USDA Agriculture Marketing Service, and we're very pleased to have the National Shell Egg Supervisor, Mr. Jeff Hendricks, to present an overview of AMS egg facility sanitation programs. Jeff, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Dana, and welcome everyone again. As Dina had mentioned earlier, we had definitely planned on having some face-to-face time meetings, but situations change, and we're really fortunate to have this platform so that we can continue on with the outreach and educational opportunities. Again, my name is Jeffrey Hendricks. I'm the actual National Shell Egg Supervisor for USDA Shell Egg Grading Program, and I'm fairly new to the role. I assumed the role from the previous National Supervisor in January of this year. So again, I was really kind of hoping to get out and see a lot of you face to face, but we have been at AMS working on a number of projects, maybe most prominently over the last couple of years, some of our review and updates of sanitation policies for our voluntary egg grading program. So I was wanting to bring a couple of those updates and some expectations and views on how we see our sanitation programs continuing. So I'd first like to talk about sort of how AMS views different types of shell egg facilities, or I guess you could say categories that shell egg facilities fall into that may be able to use our grading services. The first type is the producers that have less than 3,000 laying hens on site. Those producers routinely, there's no USDA or FDA regulatory oversight for those producers. They're usually regulated by state and local authorities, and I don't really know if we have a grasp on the number of how many facilities that they might represent nationwide. Now, once you hit the 1,000 hen mark, or you have more than that, there are a couple of registrations and regulations that come into effect, and one of them being USDA's Egg Products Inspection Act, which under that has a shell egg surveillance program for everyone that has either 3,000 or more hens, or that sorts and segregates for quality from hens or eggs that are not your own, that you're buying those in from somewhere else. We have in that program registered 436 shell egg surveillance registrants. And of those, about 50% of them, or 221, are actually USDA official plants or customers that use the USDA voluntary shell egg grading program. And you can see a map below of all of the customers we have and sort of the distribution across the United States of those customers that participate in the voluntary egg grading program. Now, some of the differences I'd say between the shell egg surveillance program, which is mandatory, maybe the major difference, and our voluntary grading program is once you hit the designation of 3,000 or more, you're sorting and segregating from someone else's supply, then you must, it's not voluntary, you must register and submit to at least quarterly inspections to make sure that you're producing and putting into consumer channels the minimum grade of eggs. Eggs are only examined quarterly for these inspections. They only need to be B grade or better. Certain state requirements may require that only eggs produced can be A or better quality, but for the USDA Shell Egg Surveillance Program, we're looking for a minimum of B grade. And there's no weight requirement for this surveillance program. There's also no identification as far as labeling. I know with poultry, you'll see a lot of inspection labels for everything that's went under the mandatory inspections, but for the Shell Egg Surveillance Program, there's no labeling or anything that shows that you've underwent that program. Additionally, there's no wash water or sanitizer requirements in the surveillance program. And very limited sanitation standards in that sanitation is not monitored every day by USDA, but only the quarterly visits in which the inspections occur. There are some standards from FDA, just some GMP type standards that if we see something in on the inspections, we're required to report. But depending on whether you're considered a farm or a food processing facilities, those standards can actually be quite different. So with our voluntary program, the nature of it is that we're here to service the egg industry. We're here to help you market your eggs. We're here to help certifications through third party, being us, in your facility, to guarantee your customers some extra level of comfort with whatever marketing claims and processing procedures that add value to your eggs. With our voluntary program, it's completely user fee funded. So only those companies and facilities that want us to be there have us there, and then they pay for us to be there. We do have standards, and while we use the same standards, the United States class and grade of eggs for assessing the Shell Egg Surveillance Program, with the voluntary program, the eggs packed into the cartons with the USDA grade shield on them, as shown below, must meet or exceed the quality stated. So if you're packing into a package that's labeled as AA, you cannot pack over certain percentages of egg qualities under that AA. Also, we have a variety of shield designations. I have some of them shown here that you can use to help market the eggs if you're in the USDA voluntary program. Some of our newest shields, as seen on the far right, are the grade shields with the cage-free banner under them. We had some customers come to us and request us to tell a better story that USDA is actually looking further into the certification and verifications of eggs when they're marketed as cage-free. So if you have a USDA shielded egg that's marketed as cage-free, you can opt to use these shields. Additionally, when you're a customer of the USDA voluntary program, you're still under regulations specifically in 7 CFR 56. Now, again, these are voluntary regulations that you choose to be under, but if you're a part of the program, some of the additional things, some of the additional regulations that you're opting to be under is having us to come in and at least do an initial survey of your facility to make sure that it is able to maintain and keep minimum sanitary standards. You're agreeing to allow us to be there during processing and monitor the production of shell eggs that are labeled with the USDA grade shield. We're looking at chemical usage in these regulations. They have egg washing requirements, sanitizing steps, and additional specific sanitizing of all shell eggs, cooler temperature requirements, packaging and labeling approval by USDA. But as highlighted, one of the big components is the sanitation portion of our regulations. And just to point out a few areas of those, in 56.76, when we come into before service is started and we do our initial review, we fill out a review form, and some of the things it requests, even from the outside of the facility, is that these facilities are free of trash and rubbish and things that might harbor rodents and vermin and insects. Also, that the properties are properly graded and don't store or don't hold excessive amounts of water that can cause odors or again have can lead to insect problems. And this is sort of defining the scope of what USDA AMS program looks at, because you'll see in our review we actually don't go into the houses, but once we sort of define your processing area, we are, our purview is your entire processing area inside and outside. We're also looking at the structure of your facilities to make sure that, it's sound, that the construction is in place to prevent any sort of entrance from insects and vermin. And you can see in this picture that, we have a door here that we might see that's not properly closing, that's been damaged. So something like this could actually prevent or at least delay the start of voluntary shell egg grading services until corrections are made. Here's a view of the survey form that we fill out before services are started, and some additional areas that we're looking at is, the walls and ceiling and floor throughout your whole facility. In addition to the grading room, dry storage areas, coolers, chemical storage, and the actual equipment and machinery that you're using to process your eggs. And to cite some of the regulatory language that we use when discussing our policies for our sanitation program, you'll see this in multiple regulations. One of them I've cited here out fully. The other ones use similar language in that we name multiple times in our regulations that a particular area, such as the grading and candling equipment, has to be constructed so that it's designed to facilitate cleaning, and your equipment should be kept reasonably clean during grading and operations and be thoroughly cleaned at the end of each operating day. And those terms are going to be important a few additional slides into this presentation, because we actually had gotten away at AMS slightly from using that reasonably clean term into pre-operational sanitation form. But we can see we did no regulation changes. This is the way it's read for decades, that reasonably clean is to be used during processing, while at the end of each processing day, the operations are to be thoroughly clean. Again, not only is that for your equipment, that goes for your packing rooms as well as the cleaning operations. So a couple of years ago now, doesn't really seem that long ago, we had a egg recall on the East Coast. A few 100 million eggs was recalled, and it was at a facility that used AMS's voluntary grading services. Of course, it caused a lot of hardship on the company itself that had the recall, but there was also a lot of questions aimed at USDA AMS in that, regulators are not in these facilities every day. FDA comes in and did in this instance on a trace back, but they're not there every day. So they say, well, AMS employees are there every day. You're the only government agency around for hundreds of miles. How did you have a facility with a recall when you're there and you have some sort of sanitation program in place? And of course, we have to describe the nature of AMS's sanitation program, which is a quality sanitation program. We are not a food safety organization. If we were, we would be required in all facilities, not just the facilities that choose to have voluntary services. But, those are still kind of pointed questions that we had to take into consideration. And, for a Salmonella outbreak, if there's no other indicator factors, because all of our sanitation procedures are based off of organoleptic assessments. And so we're not going to see salmonella. We just need to make sure that the organoleptic assessments, the cleanliness and removal of debris and excess buildup of material, is continuing to be thoroughly taken care of each day. So we were asked by AMS upper management to undergo a comprehensive review, looking at regulations, looking at our policies, and looking at how we implement those regulations and policies across the United States. As I showed you already, some of our regulations, they're pretty sound, and they allow for us to have a wide berth of what sort of policies we put in, because it says that that the facilities and the equipment should be designed to be cleaned and to be cleaned daily, right? So, we went around and looked at about 28 USDA official facilities around the country. I've got listed here what states our office traveled to. It was myself. I was assistant national egg supervisor at the time. Victor Barajas was my partner there from the West Coast, and we went around to a number of states in the center of the country on both coasts just to see what our sanitation practical application looked like on a daily basis. And we did come up with a few ideas for policies that we could do better on. One of those is we needed to sort of standardize what sort of lighting requirement. Well, actually, first thing we did was we saw that with equipment getting larger, machinery getting bigger, often plant size, cooler size getting larger, that our minimum time just was not enough. So we increased that minimum time to 30 minutes. Now, in many facilities, it still takes longer than 30 minutes to conduct pre-op sanitation in the morning. Depends on how many machines you have, and honestly, how much help you give the grader by having your machines open and accessible, and maybe help walking around with them and getting that sanitation knocked out. If there's more challenges each morning that need to be corrected, that's going to take longer. We also quantified the type of flashlight that we use. We've always had in regulations that the customers provide us with a flashlight. Well, we had a wide variety of different flashlights being used. So at minimum, we went, and right now we're actually supplying. We haven't removed it from our policies and regs that it's to be supplied by the customer, but we've supplied everybody with a flashlight at 900 lumens according or as assessed by the FL1 standard. So if you're ever asked to buy your USDA personnel flashlight again, you should make sure that it has the FL1 standard on the packaging, and it's a minimum of 900 lumens. So we also made a few updates to our report. Mainly, we removed the term reasonably clean from the pre-op report, as that wasn't really regulatorily sound. Pre-operation should have been thoroughly clean. Does not mean that AMS is not to be reasonable in their assessments. It's just that the description of clean should be thorough clean at the end of operations. We added quite a new bit of equipment, as a lot of the new machinery comes with new equipment, like the parts washing cabinets, and then some of the equipment like egg separators and centrifuges that we weren't seeing when the last update to the form was completed. We also added a good bit of areas, or we upgraded what was critical areas, basically everything from the drying system back to the accumulator, to considering them critical as part of the egg processing equipment. And while I think a majority of our graders were already looking at farm belts and conveyors coming in under the conveyor section of the previous form, it wasn't being done consistently. So we spelled out that farm belts are to be looked at, and it is the one thing in the processing facility that's an egg contact area and still a non-critical component. We also increased the number of non-contact areas on our form. Our previous form, as we looked through all the different areas and components, we had the critical areas, but then we sort of lumped all of them into one non-critical section. Our new form that we come out with, and by the way, this form was implemented on January the 1st of this year, now has the critical and non-critical areas for each component. For example, on the screen here, we see that item number C is your washer and heat exchangers. And then C1 would be the non-critical, non-contact components of those same areas. So you can have more likelihood of getting satisfactory for certain areas and not always getting unsatisfactory if you have, a non-critical detail that needs to be corrected each day. So our evaluation methods, we were asked to look at, do we go to swabbing like FDA does, or I know some of the SQF is starting to require this, and we've decided that because of the quality nature of the AMS sanitation assessments that we're going to stay with organoleptic sight, smell, feel type assessments only. And now we have quite a few exhibits that we'll go through, and it's mainly covering the new critical items because there was a lot of concern come January if items that were previously critical was going to be a major holdup in the new year. Fortunately, I can report that, I think we've got the word out early enough that corrections could be made in certain areas prior to the implementation of this. We also made sure that we did, as much outreach as possible. And through the new year, we understood that this was a work in progress, and we had to get there. Sometimes we were contacted by companies that said, we need a few days to get something in place to fully meet what requirements you have, and that was fine. So we're looking at these farm belts, and one of the big concerns was that the older farm belts would not be able to meet a sanitary requirement for AMS. Both of the farm belts you're looking at here do meet those. They're fortunate in the way that they don't come in very far, so there's not really a lot to have to clean there. That's a pretty good design to not have your farm belt bringing in a lot of debris from the farm very far into the facility. I can also point out on the right-hand picture sort of the scope of where our sanitation starts. You can see that it's coming in from the houses. There's a door there. AMS traditionally does not go in that area past that door. Where your eggs come in and what we consider the processing facility to sort of begin. And I know it's not always defined so well in every facility, but we try to define that and limit our scope to your processing room. So again, both of these farm belts, although the older style, not the lubing type system, are satisfactory. We had a number of facilities that reached out and said they had rooms like we see here. It's sort of an extension of their farm area, very open to the processing room. And this one was an attempt to put up a chain and said, the processing room is sort of designated. So this is not satisfactory in that that's not going to keep us out from the assessment. We have processing equipment, trolleys, looks like some panels from the equipment there that's being stored, and those are used in the processing room as well. We spoke with the facility here and said that either AMS will include this in our assessment, including the farm belt through here, which means we have to be able to assess that farm belt, and the farm belt in that area needs to be able to be cleaned. We can see there's a lot of eggs on it. Or, if there was a true barrier there, and then they no longer use that as part of their processing room, that, we may not consider it part of our purview. Other examples of older belts, on the left-hand side, we see one that's definitely older. It's got cracks, it's got frays, but it's clean and still acceptable. So what we're not wanting to see is like the photo on the right-hand side, where we have egregious amounts of buildup of manure and foreign material that's coming in with the eggs being left on the belt, no cleaning of the belt, inside the processing room occurring, and then the belt looking like this. So that would be an unacceptable farm belt. On the lubing styles and on this particular one, it's satisfactory, obviously. It's very clean, looks brand new. And when we was actually taking these photos, I was able to talk with plant management here. This is a 15-year-old lubing. So, with proper care and cleaning, they can look brand new after 15 years. Here's one that came straight in from the farmhouse, and they did not have a cleaning schedule. And we can see that there's a good deal of buildup and dander and debris from the housing. So this would be one that would need attention and would be unsatisfactory. On the accumulator tables, this is what we're expecting to look like, clean and free of debris. Our USDA personnel were instructing to make sure they're also having these Teflon dividers looked at and under. We know that those can be removed. The sensor bar that has a channel up above it also needs to be looked at, but this is what we would like to see for an accumulator, a clean accumulator each morning. Small amounts, and I've got arrows pointing here to a few fragments of shells, will not be a problem. So this would also be satisfactory. What we're not wanting to see is a large amount of accumulated material left over from the end of the day. So this photo here would be an unsatisfactory condition, would need to be corrected. Additional, anything, and some of this equipment is hard to look at, especially underneath. You should have these panels off and areas open so that the USDA can get in and quickly assess. But the underneath areas of these components need to be clean. This would be an unsatisfactory accumulator belt from underneath, as well as some of the non-contact areas that would need to be addressed. Here's an example of a washer, which obviously looks clean and is satisfactory, at least from what we can see. Again, the point of this is to say that when we come in the morning, if everything is open with panels off and your filter covers off and any kind of doors raised, it allows us to look at things more quickly and get through the sanitation more quickly than having to, request for parts and panels to be removed. Inside the washer, we can see some unsatisfactory remnants of either soap scum on the right-hand side. I believe there's some some egg meat left on the left-hand side on the brushes. Now, this would be a critical unsatisfactory, would need to be addressed before processing begins. We also see the coils of the washer on the left-hand side, which look to be clean. Inside the washer tank, we see on the right-hand side that there's still soap scum and some residue left over from the previous production, so that would be unsatisfactory. On these heat exchangers, on the models that have heat exchangers, we need to make sure that not only are we looking at the inline filter, this one's unsatisfactory with the residual debris on it, but that we're taking out and looking at the heat exchanger from inside the tube. We do have policies where you go to reduced heat exchanger assessments, not cleaning. They're still supposed to be cleaned every day. But if you have a good cleaning regimen and need it put together, you can talk with their local AMS about having a reduced assessment period on those. The rollers, we can see on top, we've got a line of black spools. They look clean and satisfactory. They don't have to be brand new, and as long as it's clean, they can have cuts and nicks in them as long as you have the debris and egg meat off of them. The blue spools at the bottom would, of course, be unsatisfactory with residual egg meat left on it. And the dryers, these are now critical areas, and not only that, because the air that blows through the filters contacts all the eggs, the filters are actually critical as well, even though they may be located in a different area from where the eggs are. So you need to make sure that you have the filter accessible for the grader each day, and that it looks like the nice blue Neuther down here, not the filter that's obviously dirty, which would be unsatisfactory. And here's just a different type of filter. The one on the left-hand side is new and satisfactory. The one on the right-hand side, not only is the filter, but also the motor housing is unsatisfactory. And you can see down below that when I rubbed my hand across it, there was some debris on that filter that needed to be taken care of. And filters from older style machines as well, and making sure that we look inside, all the different components, and not just the outside filters, but inside the filter areas. And as well as the baffles and air knives for the drying areas. They need to be open and accessible and should not have any residual egg, meat, and debris left on them from previous processing. This one is obviously satisfactory, and it's what we would expect to see each day. Now, when we did our overview of all the different facilities, we saw that, as new equipment got introduced, there was some opportunity for us to train more consistently. So some of the things that we attempted to do was to hold a internal AMS egg grading schools. We were going to hold 30 of them for 500 employees. Of course, COVID-19 has sort of reared its ugly head, and we stopped those for a while. We hope to start back as soon as possible. But I also worked with Dina Jones at ARS and Dr. Darren Karcher at Purdue University to develop some training videos. And I've actually got a card here that shows the link you can go to for those training videos. And I'll show you, here's an example. There's 6 of them up here that go from the introduction, includes a farm belt video, an accumulator video. It does not tell you how to clean them, but it does tell you what AMS is sort of looking at for assessment. We decided after starting these trainings that we would not limit those just to AMS view only. So you can go to that link and anybody can see these videos. There'll probably be 20 or more when they're finally finished. I think we got about 4 more in the works. It's close to ready to go up. And then I just wanted to leave you with this card again with the link that you can go to and kind of look at those training modules. So thank you. And if you've got any questions on anything that I've covered here, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A section, and I'll try to answer you as quickly as I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for that wonderful presentation. As Jeff mentioned, I would like to motion back down to the bottom of your screen where you have the Q&A tab. As you see, if you have a question, please feel free to type that in there, and I will try to keep a track of those as best as possible. Good afternoon, everybody. Like Dina said, my name is Manpreet Singh, and I'm from the University of Georgia. And, our next speaker is Dr. Dina Jones from the USDA ARS here in Athens. She actually will help us answer the question, which came first, sanitation or food safety? With that, I will turn it over to Dina.
Thank you, Manpreet. And again, please do log your questions for any of the speakers within the session in the Q&A box, and we will make get those answered for you. Today, I'm going to speak to you about sanitation, how we've become the place that we are in the egg industry, and what do we understand about sanitation. Food safety matters. It's important. It's going to make the news. We can see it now. There's actually 2 current food safety investigations and recalls that are in play dealing with different food items, thankfully not eggs or poultry at the current moment. But recently we have had several recalls for various organisms, which have included various isolates of salmonella, which are all human pathogens. And also we have had a Listeria monocytogenes recall and outbreak associated with hard-cooked eggs. So let's go over the facts that we know. Number 1, yes, eggs are indeed a raw agricultural commodity. And yes, the egg and fecal matter do exit the bird at the same point. Yes, eggs in the United States, especially those commercially processed and available in the retail setting, are washed. And actually that washing is under very prescribed conditions. Yes, there is a safe handling statement on every carton as is required for our labeling laws. Yes, the carton does say that eggs must be refrigerated, and it says it very clearly on the outward facing primary panels of the carton. But no, everyone does not handle eggs properly. And ultimately, yes, it is your name and the contact information for your company or the processing plant code that are on the carton that will lead for when something goes wrong, they're going to come back. So what do we know about egg processing plant sanitation and egg safety? So I'm going to give you a little traipse through history and research and the facts that we know about this. In 1943, so we're going back a while, we found it was published that disinfecting eggs reduces the potential for spoilage of eggs. So before that, the washing was not common. So washing did start after these findings so that eggs could be stored for a longer period of time. And it was spoilage organisms and not necessarily food safety that was the concern. One of the issues we had is that the initial washing methods that were developed did involve stagnant or immersion washing, which is outlawed in the United States now. In 1970, we had come out that the addition of sanitizers and detergents to egg wash water aided in controlling the buildup of microorganisms in the wash water. And in this study, they utilized quaternary ammonia or chlorine-based detergents and sanitizers in the wash, and they determined that cleaning compounds need to be added and water needs to be changed throughout the processing shift. So it's not a matter of just set it and forget it. It is a dynamic process because we do have organic matter that builds up in our egg wash water. In 1981, research came out, and by the way, anybody who would like copies of these articles, I haven't put all the citations because I'm just trying to clip through them for you quickly. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to have my email address at the end, and I'll be happy to send you any of these articles if you would like to have them. But in 1981, it was published that chlorine becomes completely inactivated within minutes in egg wash water. And that was when wash water in the study was being run at a pH between 7 and 8. Currently, we wash at a much more caustic pH, generally that greater than pH of 10. Wash water temperature was 40 degrees Celsius, which is around 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is slightly lower than what we see most time now in the U.S. for egg washing. Chlorine concentration was initially around 270 parts per million, yet it was still very quickly deactivated. For this study, they put egg solids in to actually account for about 1% as what the contamination rate was of the egg solids. And the conclusions were based on that the chlorine inactivation was occurring because of the egg solids in the wash water. In 1981, we had research that came out that said that counts on washed egg surfaces correlate with the counts on equipment and in wash water. So this study determined that the major source of bacterial counts in wash water was equipment surfaces, not the unwashed eggs. And that careful daily cleaning of egg washing equipment surfaces to reduce the microbial counts resulted in lower microbial counts on the washed eggs. In 1993, it was published that maintaining wash water at greater than or equal to 40 degrees Celsius, which is around 104 Fahrenheit, and a pH of greater than or equal to 10 was insufficient to reduce bacterial wash water loads 5 logs. So if you ended up having a very high microbial count in your wash water, the temperature and your pH from your detergent was not going to be sufficient in reducing those greater than 5 logs. In 2001, there was a report discussing the use of rapid methods to assess sanitation effectiveness in the processing facility. And the key point to remember about these quick tests is that they're a screening tool. They do not give you absolute counts. They do not give you results that you can necessarily compare across processing facilities, but it does give you a marker for looking at how things are happening in that particular processing environment. And there are multiple different methods that are available. I just grabbed some screenshots so you can see them. This is not necessarily meant to say that one quick test method is better than another, but I wanted you to see that they can look different. They're not necessarily all the same, and they may have different usefulness for you, or they may have different impacts based on cost. But of course, this is for your own assessment to determine what works best for your facility. In 2002, a study came out that said that plant employees should read chemical labels. It was finding that not only is employee safety important for utilizing and keeping up with the chemicals that are utilized for sanitation and processing, but also that effective usage rates are important. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing. You can add too much chemical either in your wash water or in your cleaning and sanitation, and it can have negative effects either on the equipment or on your product quality. And also very important to keep in mind about employee health who are utilizing those chemicals. And there's also such thing as too little of a good thing. You can put too little in and be outside of the effective zone. So you need to work in concert with your chemical or sanitation chemical suppliers and have them help you address your needs and make sure you fully understand the benefits and the effective usage rates for the programs that you're utilizing. So now we're going to enter into the dark side, which is my favorite side, which is the data portion, but I know everyone else doesn't get as excited about it. So let me talk to you. I just said 5 log. What does that mean? For people other than Manpreet and I who are sitting on this, we spend our life talking about logs because we're talking about microorganisms. But let me give you a visual understanding of what we mean when we say logs. Basically, I tell people you'd add that many zeros behind the number. So 1 log would be 10 organisms. And then when we look at 6 logs, we're looking at 1,000,000. So when we're talking about dropping things down 5 logs, if it was at 6 logs, you would go from 1,000,000 organisms down to perhaps somewhere between 10 and 100 organisms. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 different studies, and many of you probably heard me talk about the first one, but I'm going to give it to you in a little bit different light today. We conducted a survey many years ago, over 15 years ago, in shell egg processing facilities in the southeastern portion of the United States. And during this time, we compared and we went in and swabbed all the processing facilities at the end of the processing day. And then the same people came back in the next morning and swabbed the exact same areas. And during the time between those 2 samplings, sanitation procedures were conducted. So we were looking to see what was the change in the microbial loads that occurred between the end of the processing day and after sanitation had taken place and the facility was getting ready to run. We did both egg contact and non-contact surfaces, and we monitored 2 different indicator populations. Today, I'm only going to talk to you about the aerobic plate counts, which are an indicator of general sanitation status. The moral of the story from that study is that no plant that was tested had a significant reduction or change in the microbial levels on any swab surface after conducting their sanitation program. So obviously sanitation procedures at that time, which remember it was 15 years ago, could have been improved to have a better outcome on overall sanitation. Subsequently after that study, a colleague at the time, Dr. Mike Musgrove, as part of his dissertation research, conducted a study that we all participated in where we went into 3 of those 9 facilities and we visited each plant 3 times. And then we went in and the facility stopped the line and all of us went in and grabbed eggs from certain points of the line. And we looked to see what actually were the microbial levels present on the shell surface at all these different points in processing. And so this was the 3 facilities were an inline, an offline, and a mixed operation. So today I'm going to show you both of these so we can look at what were the levels present on the equipment surfaces for before operations when we did our pre-operation swabbing in those facilities from the first study. And then we're going to look at what were the counts that were present in those portions of the processing line from the second study. So remember, these are 2 different studies, but they do involve some 3 of the same processing facilities. So when we look at data slides, everything on the left is going to be from the sanitation study, and all of that data will be in the blue boxes. And then all the data from the shell surface study where we went in and grabbed the eggs off the processing line is going to be on the right side of the screen of the slide, and it's going to be within a green colored box. And these are the average results that were found across the study. So first we see here, and we're always looking at the general indicators of sanitation, which is our aerobic plate counts, APC. So we see from the farm belt, and at the farm belt as it's entering in the inline and mixed operations, we had a swab level of about 5 log. But when we took eggs directly off the accumulator, which is directly after the farm belt, it rolls from the farm belt onto the accumulator in these same facilities, those eggs had an average count of 4.6 logs, which microbiologically is the same. Within a log of each other is considered similar from a biological sense when we're talking about microbial results. If you look down, we did not swab the pre-rinse, so I just wanted to give you an idea. If some of you have a wetting bar in your facilities, those levels, once the eggs have gone under the wetting bar, the microbial levels had decreased to 3.35 logs. So then we go to the washer. So in the first washer on the lid and in the brushes, we saw 2.1 and 3.1 So of course the lids were they were not direct contact surfaces, and the brushes were contact surfaces. When eggs were pulled out from the first washer in the facilities, we had microbial counts of basically the same thing, of 2.35 log on the shells. In the second washer, we have counts ranging between 2.7 on the lid and 3.3 on the brushes. But in the second washer, we had 1.9 on the shell surface. Also, when the eggs were leaving the sanitizing rinse bar and we grabbed them, we had a count of 2.36 logs, which biologically is similar to the 1.9, by the way. And then we did not swab the dryer in the sanitation study, but I wanted you to know that eggs, when they were leaving the dryer, had a count of about 1.17 logs. In the sanitation study, we looked at the oiler, and the flaps on the oiler had counts of 4.64 logs. When we took eggs that were coming out of the oiler, and once again, this was about 15 years ago, so we did still have some oiling taking place, those eggs had a count of 1.2 log CFU present on the shell surface per milliliter. At the check detector, and these, I will mention to you that all of these, most of these plants were running at the time diamond equipment because of which now would be legacy diamond equipment because of the age of when the study was taking place. And those check detectors were at the time very difficult to clean, and some advances have been made in that. But the check detector had average counts of 3.87 log CFU per milliliter, and eggs that were present on the check detector had counts of about 1.2 logs. When we look at the scales, I'm showing you same things because the eggs were taken from the check detector and scale area on those diamonds, so we've repeated those numbers for you. But it's important right now, let's look at the rewash belt. When we looked at the guides in the rewash belts in the sanitation study, we had very high levels of counts on these surfaces. We had almost 6 logs of count, which is almost 1 million organisms per milliliter on our sample. Those eggs that were on the rewash belt, eggs were taken at the entrance and the exit of the rewash belts in these facilities that were tested, and we had somewhere between 3.8 and 4 logs, which is a very high count to have, especially on eggs that had already been through the washing system. And we know that eggs on the rewash belt will go through the system until the end of the day when they have to be removed, or they either get washed or they break. That's how long. It's not like we have an ability to stop those eggs and only let them go through one additional time. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at your rewash belt, and particularly also about the cleaning. Rewash belts have a tendency to be in a manner so that you can get those eggs back over to the front of the processing line, and they may go up and go well above employee height so that people can walk and easily move equipment and supplies underneath them. But that also makes that a very challenging area to clean. And it also makes a challenging area to be assessed. So please consider all that when you're looking into your sanitation programs. On the packer head lanes, we have these are where our this is where the clean eggs are coming out to go be placed into the carton. And on the brushes, we have over 3.5 logs of this finished product area. And also I put the counts that were present in the egg collection study in parentheses because one facility had very high counts on the packer head brushes, but the other 2 facilities had very low counts on the eggs that were coming out of the packers. So I wanted you to see that it can be, those packer head lanes can be maintained in a manner that allows you to have lower counts on the eggs coming through them. And again, these are just some of the non-contact surfaces that were seen in the sanitation study, just so you can have a refresher and reminder. The floors were very difficult to keep clean at the time, and an effort was not necessarily put into them. You need to remember the floors in your facilities, and that needs to be an integral part of your cleaning component. Also, think about the things that move through your processing facility. Some people thought we were kind of crazy because we'd swapped the loading dock floor, but think about how many of your pallet jacks run out onto the loading dock floor and then come right back into your processed egg cooler, and then people are walking through there or moving various pieces of equipment, pallet jacks and forklifts through the processed egg cooler back out onto the processing floor, and that can just track organisms around. Sometimes we've had entry areas from the outside being able to encroach into the loading dock, and you may have been concerned about why was somebody really getting upset about it. Think about it microbiologically, that stuff can get tracked back through your facility, and it can end up causing issues. So please be aware of that. So where do we go from here? Equipment microbial contamination impacts egg microbial quality. So please keep that in mind, and please be aware of that. It is a hand-in-hand process. Egg safety and processing facility sanitation are integral. Sanitation programs are key. They're not just to check a box, we went through it. You need to have thought into it. You need to be making sure that your employees on your sanitation crew feel valued and understand their importance in your process. There was a processor who had heard me speak before about sanitation and how important it was to keep these, myself and actually another colleague, talk about how important it is to engage these employees. And the next thing we know, we were getting selfies back where we were having sanitation selfies, and this, high management of this company went out and was going at night. I'm sure they scared the bejesus out of some of the employees too, and someone who's really important shows up in the sanitation, but showed up and was taking sanitation selfies with themselves and their sanitation crews. And those started coming out and being part of the company newsletter. And we're talking about the unsung heroes and letting these employees know how important it is to engage them. They're not just people who come in while everybody else is gone and clean things. They are a very integral part of your business. And you're not on an island. Don't think, oh my gosh, now Dina's freaking me out. What am I going to do? There are people who can help. Feel free to contact me. Feel free to reach out to Jeff Hendricks and his crew if you have official facilities. They'll be happy to talk you through things. Feel free to reach out to Oscar Garrison if you're associated with United Egg Producers. He'll be happy to help you with things. We're all here to help and help you answer your questions and develop the best programs that you can. And so here's my contact information. Email is the best way, so I didn't even bother to give you my phone number because most of us are not allowed to go into our offices right now for any length of time. And then also Jeff has already mentioned about the sanitation training material, but I'm giving it to you again. And please put your questions into the chat box because we'll be happy to address those as we're moving through.
Thank you very much, Dina. I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Dina so that she can get that coordinated for the next panel discussion, which is focused on exports.
Thank you, Manpreet. Coming to you. Unfortunately, Manpreet and I live very close to each other, but we're not allowed to see each other right now. We are moving into the next portion of our program, which is going to deal with exports of not only eggs, but also poultry meat in general. And for that, we have a really great panel to participate. And I'm going to introduce all of them, and they're going to flow straight through, and we will hold answering questions you submit until the end. But please do keep submitting questions, and we're going to handle those. So please use the question and answer box that you have on the bottom of the screen. The first speaker is going to be Mary Alice Kane from USAPEC, who's going to give an overview of export programs. Following her will be Lisa Picard from the National Turkey Federation. And finally, being our anchorman for the day is going to be Oscar Garrison from the United Egg Producers. So Mary Alice, you're welcome to take over.
Thanks so much, Dina. And hi, everyone. As Dina mentioned, my name is Mary Alice Kane, and I work for the USA Poultry and Egg Export Council, better known as USAPEC, a little bit of a mouthful. But today I'm just going to give you an overview of what USAPEC is, what we do, and give you a snapshot of what U.S. poultry and egg exports look like right now. So biggest, most important question to start with is why export? And I think this is a big question for obviously those who have not started exporting, who may have an interest but are a little bit nervous about getting into that process. And then also for those who maybe have been exporting for a while, just a good reminder for you. So why export U.S. poultry and eggs? First and foremost, primarily, we export to expand and grow business. So 95% of the world's population, which is 2/3 of the total world purchasing power, is located outside of the U.S. That's huge. And I think that a lot of times, going back to the red tape, what scares a lot of folks from getting into exporting is, thinking it's such an in-depth process with tons of paperwork, and it can be very intimidating. But we're fortunate because our government has actually committed to over 20 free trade agreements with different markets around the world. So we have all of these great trade agreements in place that make it actually very easy to trade with several different markets. Additionally, the U.S. just has a competitive advantage, plain and simple. We have great technology. We have amazing manufacturing and processing equipment and programs in place, and the world recognizes that. And because of that, they trust our product and they want to buy from us. So there are customers who are just waiting out there. And lastly, and I think this is also one of the most important points when it comes to exporting, is it provides both short and long-term stability for your business. So let's say that you have a major domestic partner who may fall through. It's great that you can already have international customers there in the wings just waiting, and tons of them, I might add. So we're very pro-exports, obviously, and we definitely encourage that among the industry. Now, a little bit about USAPEAK. We have over 200 member companies, and they represent 95% of all U.S. poultry and egg exports. So clearly a large amount there. We are a nonprofit trade association. We're based here in Stone Mountain, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. And I actually climbed Stone Mountain this weekend and am still feeling the effects. So we'd love for you to come hang out with us, and we'll show you the mountain if you're ever in the area. Now, this shows you a little bit more about our membership breakdown. We're comprised of members throughout all the U.S. poultry and egg industry. So this includes chicken, turkey, and egg producers. It also includes other poultry producers, such as duck producers. We have 2 different duck members here at USAPEAK. Additionally, we have commodity members. These are comprised of corn and soybean growers. They're commodity boards across the U.S., as well as the American Egg Board. We also have trading company members. We have associate members, which represent anyone from logistics companies to cold storage and shipping, anyone who benefits along that supply chain. And then lastly, we have elite trading partners, which is a newer membership category for us. And we really like this category because we're able to partner with different businesses who are in other countries where we may not have access just yet for U.S. product. And so we establish these partnerships to be our allies and help get us into those markets and open doors for us. Now, what do we do here at USAPEAK? The thing I like to tell everyone is that we are the liaison. So we are that connecting agent between importers and exporters, and also between the federal government and the U.S. poultry and egg industry. What we do is we conduct different marketing projects, and we work to solve trade issues by protecting current markets that are open. We work to go into markets and open them if they aren't already open. We also work to develop existing markets. And lastly, we work to serve our industry. So we serve as their voice on any kind of trade policy issues to the government. We're very fortunate to have locations all around the world. We have 15 different offices, including our headquarters. And these are our boots on the ground. These are the eyes and ears in the market. These are the folks who have relationships with not only the local trade, but also are able to conduct marketing projects for us, have relationships with the FAS offices there in those markets. So they're really the first ones to get a hold of any kind of trade issues that may be going on in those markets and help communicate that information back to us here at the main office. Now, this is perhaps to me one of the most important things to take away about the U.S. poultry and egg industry is that this is such an important relationship with the soybean and corn growers in the U.S. Poultry is the largest livestock consumer of soy and corn meals, coming in at 55% for soybeans and 33% for corn. And we're really fortunate because these farmers recognize this importance and have chosen to become members of USAPEAK. And many of these groups, these soybean and corn boards, give us funding to then conduct marketing projects for U.S. poultry and eggs all around the world. So we really rely heavily on this support ultimately, these farmers also benefit from exports, and it's that symbiotic relationship where one can't exist without the other. So we're really grateful for that support. And you can see here, this is poultry and egg exports in soy and corn equivalents. And you can see that that number has consistently risen over the years. In 2019, in fact, there were 296 million corn bushel equivalents and 145 million soybean equivalents that were exported through U.S. poultry and eggs. So that was worth over $4.5 billion. Clearly, that is such an important relationship for those two industries. Now, this chart shows you poultry and egg export value over the years and how it's kind of risen and fallen over the years. We're definitely back on an upward trajectory right now, and for 2020, we're definitely projected to continue to run upward as well. Now here we're looking at the percentage of production, of U.S. production that is exported for broilers, turkeys, and eggs. And the egg category includes both shell eggs and egg products. So you can see for eggs, that number has definitely grown compared with 2019. We've had a very positive year for eggs, and a lot of that production has been exported, which has been important in a year, where we've all been struck by COVID-19. It's definitely been a way to get some of that product off the market is through exports. Turkey, you can see that that number has been relatively consistent over the years. It's a little bit down this year compared with last year, but still on a great trajectory there. And broilers, that number has also risen this year as well. Now we're looking at the top chicken exporters in the world. The U.S. has definitely led the charge. However, Brazil is our largest competitor. They are ahead of us, as you can see. They are tough competition, but the U.S. still tries very hard to compete, and we're definitely in that number 2 spot. And if we're looking at broiler markets, so where we're actually exporting those broilers to, this shows the changes over just the past 10 years. So we have 2009 on the left here, and then 2020 over here on the right. And we really like to show these two charts for comparison because it's important to show that diversifying your markets is so important when it comes to exporting. Back in 2009, China and Russia were our 2 largest markets where we exported. China, of course, was shut down to the U.S., and so that was several customers who were just no longer accessible. So everyone had to kind of scramble, figure out new markets, and now you can see 10 years later that Mexico is now a large market for the U.S., and we've diversified and expanded other markets so that we can look at opportunities there and not just put all of our eggs in one basket, so to speak. And as far as broilers are concerned, again, we're having a really great year with exports. So we are projecting this to be a record year in 2020. And again, you can see just in recent years what our strongest markets have been for exports of broilers. Mexico, always a strong market for us across all the commodities. And now you can see that China, as they're back in the game, that is our number 1 market for broilers as of right now. Taking a quicker look at turkey, I know Lisa is going to cover a little bit after me, so I won't go too in-depth. Turkey has definitely, again, been on an upward trajectory as far as exports are concerned. In 2019, there was an increase by 4.6% in volume and 8.8% in value over 2018. And if we're looking at the markets that are really important for turkey exports, Mexico, by far and large, rises to the top. That is an extremely important market for us as far as turkey is concerned. And one project that USAPEAK works on in Mexico, it's one of my favorite projects. It's the ProBoca partnership. ProBoca is a processing company in Mexico. They import U.S. turkey, and then they turn around and they develop these really cool value-added turkey products. And USAPEAK, through funding from the Indiana Soybean Alliance and Indiana Corn Marketing Council, I believe we're going on 5 years now. We've been able to give funding to the Provoca marketing program to market these products in stores like H-E-B's all across Mexico. And they've really come up with some spiffy marketing. They do in-store demos. Of course, in this day and age, digital advertising has been the main draw there. And we've just had so much success from this program. So to me, that best exemplifies the kind of work that USAPEC is doing in partnership with our members so that we can get the word out there and get people excited about U.S. products. You can also see there that China has started to rise up for turkey exports as well. That has quickly become a very important market for the U.S. Now, taking a look at eggs, again, this covers both table eggs and egg products. You can see there's been a lot of fluctuation as far as exports are concerned over the years. Eggs are definitely one of those commodities that just kind of goes up and down as far as exports are concerned, and that's perfectly normal. However, we have seen more of an upward trajectory just over the past couple of years. We dipped a little bit in 2018, and now we're back on track and having a stellar year here in 2020 as far as exports are concerned. You can see our top table egg export markets here. Hong Kong has long been a very stable, great market for U.S. table eggs. They are a major importer, one of our largest for table eggs. And Mexico is not far behind, a very consistent market there. Canada as well, the USMCA agreement has definitely allowed us to have good access to both of those countries. And then looking at egg products and the main countries there where we export, Japan, of course, is a large market. We took a little bit of a hit there over the past year or so because we pulled out of our trade agreement with Japan. However, the new agreement that's now in place, we're already seeing U.S. egg products rise again for that market. They do a lot of specialty bakeries there, a lot of European-style baking there, and so that requires egg products. And they know that the U.S. has a very superior, clean, safe product, and so they import a lot from us dramatically. It's really good that they recognize that. And then in Mexico, we have really upped our game in the egg product world there. Traditionally, that's been more of a shell egg market, but we have worked hard to make egg products the name of the game there. We've partnered with some really great bakeries who are singing the U.S.'s praises and telling other smaller bakeries there in Mexico about our products. And also, Mexico is able to import liquid egg product because of its proximity. So that's definitely been a little bit of a game changer for us. So that is a very brief overview of what we do. I would be happy to discuss further with you if you would like to know any specifics about some of our programming or learn a little bit more about USAPEC. Please feel free to reach out to me or ask some questions that we can answer at the end. But thank you for your time. And I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Thanks so much, Mary Alice. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you virtually, even though I would much rather us all be in Minneapolis and enjoying what we normally do for these fantastic presentations. So Mary Alice put a lot of charts out there with a lot of numbers, and I only have a few slides because we really take the trade kind of in a different tact. I think of it more of international affairs, and that's what you'll see on my slides. But we're absolute partners with USAPEC and with my friend Oscar, who's coming after this, when we try to look at the big picture and kind of the long-term problems. And something that sets NTF apart from what USAPEC is able to do is we're based in D.C., we are allowed to lobby. We have a very strong legislative department, and we do a lot of lobbying and time on the Hill. And so we try to find the areas where the overlap makes sense, that we can obviously increase exports of turkey products, but support efforts that USAPEC may have going on, and then also working with our feathered brethren to make sure that, a rising tide lifts all boats. And we definitely don't want to be doing things that may negatively impact our brethren, and most often we find that when we bond together, that we usually have a really pretty successful. So it's been a crazy year for everybody, and I tell you, the thing I did not want to do in the middle of a pandemic was deal with avian influenza, and this was high path AI, and It's heartbreaking to see this occur at any point in time. This scenario was even worse because it was just as we were starting to see a lot of media based around COVID-19. And we thought it would be very, very easy for the media and local authorities to kind of mix COVID-19 and high-path AI together. We started to even get a little bit of concern from some of the state officials around this issue. We thankfully were able to convince them not to do some press releases, because really that is not what you want happening on the same day that pandemics are being declared. And we were very, very worried of what that impact might have been. Thankfully, it was I want to say minor, but obviously when you're going through it, it doesn't matter if it's minor to everybody else when it's impacted your entire facility and your entire farm. But it was short-lived, if that's a bright light in it. And through cleaning and disinfecting, we did get the bans were lifted just last week, August 5th, 6th, 7th, right around there. Very grateful to USDA and to USAPEC for the pressure and the effort that they put into making sure that those bans did get lifted. Biggest concern there was at first, Mexico initially banned products in the entire state of North Carolina and South Carolina. And given Mary Alice's slides we just saw, you understand why even a couple of days of that was a big impact. But again, we were grateful to USDA and USAPEC for getting that reduced down pretty quickly to a county level ban. But hopefully we are done with high-path AI, and that will be something we'll have to talk about for years and years to come. One market we have been trying to enter for an awfully long time is Australia. And most of you know that NTF has been working on some efforts to prove or disprove the fact that the U.S. turkey industry has infectious bursal disease. So we are not able to say that we are free. We do still have our project going on with Ohio State. There was a bit of a stop with COVID, as you can imagine, as Ohio State had to close their labs. So we're getting that back into process. We're trying to figure out what our possible next steps might be, working closely with USDA on that. That's definitely a long-term goal. We are hoping to export cooked product. So disproving animal diseases really shouldn't be as big a hurdle as it's been. But we're proving a negative here, and that there's been so little research done on this disease in turkeys, and it's asymptomatic in turkeys. So this has definitely been a hurdle, and one we're going to continue to work on. Mary Alice mentioned the incredible free trade agreements that our government has put together in many, many markets. What she didn't mention on is the planning for those free trade agreements starts years, sometimes decades in advance. Morocco free trade agreement was announced last year, I believe. That had been pending for something like 15 to 17 years. So what NTF has been trying to do and really been focusing some effort on is, as free trade agreements are being developed and negotiated, putting ourselves into that part of the process. My colleague Damon Wells likes to use a phrase of, we want to be part of baking the cake, not just slicing it when it's done. And that's another area where I work very closely with Jean over at USAPEC. I know most of you know Jean, but Jean and I go back and forth again to kind of make sure that we're supporting each other and that our efforts are dovetailing. We're starting to see some positive results out of that. Turkey got some nice access in Japan free trade agreement from last year. We're hoping, obviously, with the separation of EU and UK, that maybe this will give us a little more options as far as getting in regarding our processing aspects of how turkey is produced in the plant, and looking at tariff lines and things like that. So definitely a lot of work to do. None of that is short term, unfortunately. That's all definitely long-term planning. Mary Alice mentioned USMCA implementation. This was obviously a big deal for all of us who export. For Turkey, our first priority under this was to maintain that Mexican market. It is absolutely our most important priority. We have done some pretty amazing things there, again, working in partnership with USAPEC. One of the reasons why I think Turkey sometimes had an easier road in Mexico than chicken sometimes has is because we do have a lot of these further processing agreements. So in order to block Turkey, Mexico would then also be blocking a lot of its internal industry. So it's a nice position to be in, but it's certainly not anything that we're just going to sit back on our laurels. We do want to make sure that our relationship with Mexico stays as strong as possible. And we're trying to look at the efforts that have worked in Mexico to see where we might take these programs into other countries or into other areas. The idea of helping that further process value add product within the country, because that does seem definitely a way to for us to obviously expand our sales, but it's an area of interest with the country as well, and sometimes helps us smooth things over as far as allowing larger access. We did get some additional access into Canada. It is nominal. It is certainly not an amazing amount that we wanted, but Turkey and dairy, of all things, face some of the similar issues as far as the tariffs and the quotas. So we got a little bit there. Take what we can get. Obviously, we would have liked more, and if there's opportunities for us to expand that, we'll be jumping on it. One thing I did want to kind of flag for everybody, again, given the importance of the Mexico market, is a requirement that's come up from them recently, and we're starting to see this as well in some Central American countries, and it's this front of pack labeling issue. Definitely COVID related, definitely some of the stuff I think many of you who may be exporting are familiar with the situation with China last month, where China decided to tell anybody who's sending stuff into their country, whether it was meat or produce or any type of food stuff, that they needed to sign letters saying that not only are they following WTO protocols as far as, or WHO, sorry, not WTO, WHO protocols. They were also following China COVID-19 protocols, except that no one knew what those protocols were, and if they have actually ever published them, that'll be news to me. So we get very nervous when we see anything along these lines that could be related to this. We're definitely concerned on this piece. Something that we've also started to see with front of pack with Mexico and some of the Central American is the sodium as well. So while we normally are on the higher level, bigger picture issues, when these things do come up, we do obviously work closely with our members, go back and forth with USAPEC as well. Really anything that makes Mexico any kind of a concern for us is probably going to be right up there on our radar. And that is one area that, we do have a lot invested in that market, and we obviously want to make sure that continues to be profitable, not only for us, but for our partners in Mexico. So I believe this was my last slide. I didn't have a whole bunch here, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Oscar. But thank you again for having me be a part of this, and look for questions as well.
Thanks, Lisa, for turning it over. I'm Oscar Garrison. I'm the Senior Vice President of Food Safety Regulatory Affairs with the United Egg Producers. Mary Alice did a great job setting up what USAPEC does, and we cannot, echo enough our appreciation for that organization and how they help our members day in and day out with exporting and getting their products into various markets around the country. Lisa focused really on the international affairs side, and I'm really going to focus a bit more on some of the day-to-day challenges that we see with exports and how it's not as simple as one may think. We utilize the services of USDA AMS, Agricultural Marketing Service there with Jeff Hendricks as the National Shell Egg Supervisor, really on a daily basis with these exports to certify our shell eggs and the other things that are moving in and out of the egg world into other countries. And Jeff can echo some of the challenges we have with various countries as far as unique differences, and I'll get into a few of those here shortly. So whenever you look across the board at the 229 approximately million cases of shell eggs that are produced, about 53% of those go into retail channels, with another 32% going into further processing, 10% into food service, and then 4.7 on average into exports. I know those numbers are a bit different than what Mary Alice showed, but you've also got some further processed products that end up from shell eggs into those further processed, and then those are also exported. It's a very unique year, though, for the retail side and the further processed and food service with the COVID-19, because we quickly saw not enough shell eggs, too much further processed products, and really no movement within food service. So we had to rearrange some things, move some products around, which is always a challenge. And thankfully, we have been able to maintain most of our exports there, which has helped find a home for some of the eggs that really didn't have a home previously. When you get into some of the export challenges, one of our main issues, when you look at turkey and chicken, a lot of their products are actually exported as frozen product. Some of our egg products are, but when you're looking at shell eggs in particular, many foreign countries have an expiration date requirement of 45 days or less. And it makes it very difficult to export the eggs due to transit time and customs clearance time. You know, once they arrive in the ports, they aren't simply taken off the boat and put into the marketplace. There are some clearances there. One example here is South Korea has a 45-day requirement, and the transit time from the West Coast is at least 20 days, making it virtually impossible to ship into that market. In the past, there has been where South Korea's got in some tights. There was actually airplane loads that went over for one of their holidays just to get them some eggs in there in a very timely manner. But going by boat really limits the amount of people that can export and the amount of product that can go into South Korea. Another unique challenge is marking requirements. Many countries require those eggs to actually be printed, and some really get into the colors of ink that can actually be printed on those, and they can be much different from one country to another. Printing on eggs is a major investment for a farm. Typically, farms located near ports are the most likely to make the investment in these printing and these egg printers that they can put online. But it's really still not that common in the U.S. to see these. A farm in the Midwest will have a difficulty justifying the investment from a return on investment perspective overall, with the minimal amount that they may export and then the minimal use that will get in balancing that with the cost. Weight restrictions are also another unique aspect, particularly for loads going to Mexico. Each state has different laws regarding weight restrictions on the roads, and the farm has to pack the load with the least common denominator, which raises the freight cost per dozen. So whatever transit route they're taking, they will look at which state has the most restrictive weight requirements there, and they will pack that load accordingly, and that can cause some increased freight cost, or even if it's not going into Mexico, if it's just going to the West Coast to get on a boat and out, those things can also come into play. Believe it or not, materials are can also be an issue there. Some countries require special heat-treated pallets to go in, and there's even some buyers within the countries that will require up to a 55-pound edge crush test box, which are really not common in the egg industry, and those can be very expensive and add additional cost on those to move those products. One of the most common things we see, and Jeff and I work on this a good bit, is refrigeration and washing. Most, if not all, countries don't do this, and it becomes an issue for importers. On the refrigeration side, India is approved to import U.S. eggs, but a lack of cold storage there makes it very difficult. In other countries that don't wash their eggs, they want our eggs to not be washed as well, but in order for those to be certified by USDA through their resident grading program there and grade shielded, then they have to be washed and graded through that process. So, we have to find some creative solutions to make importing from the U.S. work in these countries where they have different regulations, different laws, and also different customs as to how they handle their eggs. So as you can see, there are some challenges associated with those from a logistics standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, and many other things. But again, this is a very important piece to our members to be able to export their products out into other parts of the world. We do pride ourselves on having some of the safest, most nutritious eggs and the most functional eggs, as Dr. Jones can attest to with some of the studies that she's done. So with that, we're coming up on the 4 o'clock hour, and I'm going to wrap it up and turn it back to Dina and Manpreet for questions.
Hello, it's me now, so you're stuck with me, everybody. I do have a question, and I actually prepped Jeff for this because I wasn't going to just blindside him. Jeff, can you please speak to, since you happen to be on here from USDA AMS, can you please speak about USDA AMS's role in egg exports and certifying eggs for exporting?
Certainly. Thank you, Dina. So AMS actually plays a role of, I think it started out as almost a coach of, who needs to be in place to get these eggs exported. Shell egg regulation is fairly convoluted in that you have regulators at the local level, being state, local authorities, that between the live animals having authority by APHIS over them, USDA APHIS, the processing facility being regulated by FDA, a lot of the cooling requirements being regulated by USDA FSIS. There's so many regulators that are in that mix that you sort of had to have one agency to come together and say, okay, we're going to look at everybody's regulations, put them together into a cohesive agreement, and complete some sort of export documentation for that. And that's what AMS does. We actually have a resident international expert, Dr. Mark Lobstein, which I believe if anybody's been in the poultry or egg industry more than 6 months, probably knows him on a personal basis. But he spends his days trying to open up egg markets or service the egg or the trade partners that we already have open to. Some of the issues that Mark brought up is our starting points. Anytime, we don't usually open egg markets just to open them. We wait until a producer in the United States comes to us and says, we think we have a customer. Can we get our eggs to them? And then we start researching. Sometimes it's easy. A lot of the Caribbean countries we were able to get to, we reached out, asked if they had any conditions for importation of eggs, and let them know sort of our general export requirements that we would serve or certify at a minimum for any export. And sometimes that's all that's needed, and they'll take our certificates and our APHIS disease-free certificates. Other times you really have a lot of challenges based off of logistics and washing and cooling, disease segregation over if you have disease in your country, what parts of the area, whether you're going to restrict at county levels versus the whole national level. So it takes a group of people. We work closely with the Foreign Ag Service, of course, APHIS and FDA, to try to answer any sort of questions that the import agencies will have in those various countries. And, a lot of it is driven by the users in those countries. We recently had, I believe it was down in Panama, they came to us and said, you wash your eggs, you refrigerate them, but we don't have the capability of doing that here, or don't commonly do it. And we feel that there may be a risk of quality degradation or something like that. And of course, we can't control what goes on in an export partner's country once it arrives. But then the community, there was a large Jewish community down there that got all their kosher eggs from the United States. And they stopped trade for a while, and that community went and complained, and then the market got opened back up. Sometimes it takes things like that. Other times there's a lot of, we don't leverage so much as explain what kind of quality we're sending over, that we're not sending over our undergrades or our lower quality eggs, but that any egg that you get in another country could very easily have been an egg that we would have eaten at our own dinner table. But from time to time, it does come down to asking the question, because we export a lot of genetic stock to hatching eggs, which, is probably one of the riskiest items that you can send over as far as animal disease. And so when they give us a lot of requirements and continue to ask us questions and questions over again and delay process, that's one of the questions we ask is, why is it so easy for our genetic stock to get in, which is a fairly risky product, versus our table eggs? And of course, they have different responses to that, but obviously, the genetic stock is simply needed, versus with the table eggs, they are often trying to protect their own interest there. But we after we open markets, some of them go very, very smoothly, and we don't hear much out of them. They simply take our eggs as agreed upon. There are other markets that, we have to service quite a bit. They really look through the documentation. If anything is not matching up or completed exactly correctly, then they'll, have stuck loads at borders. And my office probably spends, up to 20% of our time any week just resolving some minor clerical issues to keep trade flowing. So we're sort of a catch-it-all shop for table eggs, and to a lesser extent, some of the other processed egg products. I don't work on this as much. Mark Lobstein in my shop does, but we offer some auditing programs for the after egg products leave the FSIS regulated facility and go on to another facility to be turned into crepes or omelets or egg patties or something like that. We have an audit program that's basically a GMP audit program, and when they're in a program, we can issue export certificates, AMS can, for those types of items. Because not all countries have the same structure in place to have those types of items made, some of those can be easier to actually get access for than the table egg market. So that's sort of the role we play.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you to everyone who's attended our session today. I would also like to draw your attention to the sponsors of the education program who are allowing these programs to be accessible through the remainder of the month. And thank you all very much, and have a very pleasant stay on the rest of your virtual Midwest Poultry Federation conference. The processing session will start again tomorrow morning. Thank you.